In a world within our world, they've created a world unlike any other world.
Dungeons and Dragons. And a game like D&D fuels their imagination and makes them feel special.
The ogre is amused by your joke and allows you to pass.
Dad, I'm just curious. What is it about Dungeons and Dragons that suddenly leapt out at you at age 60?
Dungeons, it'd be the dungeons.
Just what I love about role-playing games is being told exactly what to do.
Me too. You should introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to Guelph Community Radio 93.3 CFRU. My name is Mike the Birdman, and you are listening to The Spellbook, the show that is focused on the tabletop role-playing game hobby that we all know and love. And it's not necessarily that weird thing you do in your basement with your friends on a Saturday night. That's a different podcast or radio show. But I'm not alone as I trek through the wonderful world of Imagination Land. I'm joined by my compatriot from the wonderful world of London, Ontario, Canada.
I am Damien, Magical Hack Morphit, coming to you, as Mike said, from the Forest City, London, Ontario.
I have got the energy tonight, which is kind of weird. I'm exhausted. But I'm excited to be here tonight. So as you heard last week on the show, we had a pretty interesting discussion talking about genre-based stuff, like space-based stuff, and just things you can do to add to your TTRPG experience should you want to travel to where no one has gone before, though not necessarily Star Trek. So today, we wanted to talk about something a little bit more open, sort of a open forum discussion, if you will. And it's going to be talking about games we want to play. And this could be older stuff. It could be something that maybe hasn't been created yet. This could be a hack that might appear on Reddit or on some paste bin somewhere. There are all sorts of things. I mean, I have been playing role-playing games. I started back in 1992 with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. Now, for one of the games I want to go back and play, I actually want to go back and play original AD&D 2nd edition. And the reason behind that is my first experience with that game system was not great. I did not have a dungeon master who was very engaged, who didn't think about narrative plot development, nor did mission or monster encounters have any real sort of rhyme and or reason to them, which kind of took away from the magic of the experience. And I play in a private game with my friend Nick, and he's an old school AD&D player too. And I've heard such wonderful stories about, you know, Greyhawk and Dragonlance and all stuff pre-3rd edition. And I kind of want to live that experience too. Like, I'm actually kind of jealous that I didn't have that D&D experience of growing up with the different boxes or the really strange looking monster and dungeon master guys from way back when that had like that weird pukey orange spine. Hey, Damon, I'm sure you know exactly the color that I mean. And there was something so indefinable about role-playing in those days, because obviously you had your set of dice, which are harder to find than you might think. And it felt like to me, that was fantasy distilled to its purest form and almost more innocent, despite that still being coming out of the satanic panic of the 1980s and into the 90s. That's something I really want to go back and revisit. So if I had to pick a game right off the top of the show, it would be AD&D 2nd edition from the 1990s. What about you, Damien? Let's get into your history. Like, where'd you start? Because I think you started with Palladium. Do you want to revisit that, or do you want to try something else? Or do you want to try something new and weird?
Okay, so before I get into that, I did want to respond to what you were saying about AD&D 2nd. So, two things, really. One's a bit of trivia. So you were mentioning stuff like Greyhawk and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The 3rd and 3.5 setting, like book setting for D&D, was actually set in Greyhawk. So like
Oh.
all of the lore and stuff like that presented in like the player's handbook, all of the write-ups for the gods. That
Mhm.
yeah, that's what that is. That's Greyhawk.
Awesome.
Yeah. Whereas now for 5th edition, the setting is Faerû. Um, but yeah, so like second edition AD&D, getting to the second point, there is actually the first edition of D&D that I had ever played.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was definitely, if you played with the wrong GM, it was definitely brutal. Or the right GM, if that's the direction you want to go.
Mhm.
But to kind of follow in the same vein as you here, right off the hop, if I was to revisit a a system that I played in the past, I actually would go with it's a tie between either Palladium RPG or Rift. And it's because that crunch in the character creation specifically, that at the time when I first saw that, and I'm sure you've seen like looked at like the Rift character creation in the
Mhm.
past, and you know how complex that can
Yeah, I'm actually rather surprised Palladium has never done an officially licensed app for something like that, but I know app development's very expensive.
be. Yeah, like I'm surprised. I'm actually there's probably somebody who's made an app for character creation for those games, but there was just something that spoke to younger Damien about having, your skills that you pick, which obviously are going to help you through gameplay, also affect how your character comes into game. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Because
Yeah.
like, you start with athletics, athletics 4. I know that's not the way it's done. I'm just using it as as an example here. Um, your character, even with the same starting stats as somebody who didn't take, athletics at that same level, would just naturally be tougher because through gaining that skill, it would reflect in your base stats. And like, I thought that like that spoke to like the simulationist brain in me, and that's something that I would definitely like to revisit because I love the crunch of it. Um, and I definitely want to do it as a player rather than as a GM.
Yeah, like I look at the Palladium system and I have very limited experience with it, though much like you, it's one of those systems that I'm very intrigued by. Like I've had the chance many, many moons ago to interview Kevin Simbita from Palladium, and he made it sound really interesting. I mean, one of the games that Palladium still publishes today, and you can still get a copy of this. I'm actually looking to get the hardcover versions of these books that have been re-released, and that's TMNT and Other Strangeness. And
Ooh, nice.
it blows my mind that Palladium has held this RPG since like the late 80s, and it's still in their stable of books that still regularly publish. And like I said, recently had a Kickstarter, and now you can buy it at mass retail right now. One of the things I've always admired about the Palladium system, I will say I'm not a huge fan of the crunch, but I love how modular it is. The fact that if you want to have something from Riffs or Robotech come over into TMNT, conversion's not that hard. I've always thought that was really interesting, and I guess that kind of leads me along the same path there, like sticking with like kind of Palladium. I love Robotech. I love the idea of fighting against the Robotech Masters or the Invid or, what other creatures come seeking our proto culture and whatever. I love that stuff. And the fact that it was so well supported that I feel under the right storyteller, a Robotech campaign would be really enthralling. And one of the things you're probably going to notice with me talking about the RPGs and games that I want to play is I want to have a game master who is passionate. I want to have someone who knows the lore inside and out. I'm not saying I want George Lucas to guide me through my own personal Star Wars adventure. Honestly, I wouldn't pick George. I'd pick Dave Filoni if I was going to pick anybody. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, when you have the right game master, the system doesn't really matter, but at the same time, it's the world that you're like kind of playing in. Like, I tend to draw myself towards licensed RPGs, stuff like your Ninja Turtles, your Robotech, your Star Wars, your Star Trek, etc. But that's not to say there aren't other game systems I'd love to check out. Like, for example, Chaosium. They are the people who started horror off on the right foot with Call of Cthulhu in the early 80s. And I have only ever run Call of Cthulhu. I think I may have played once, maybe twice. And the person I knew how to spin a suspenseful horror tale, but they didn't know how to run Lovecraftian horror. And that's a very specific type of storytelling, because in Call of Cthulhu, one of the things that I've always kind of taken away from that property, and that in the intellectual property as a whole, is the best you can ever do is to break even. Like, you're not going to walk up to Yog-Sothoth with a rocket launcher. You're not going to march into Cthulhu's house on relay with an M60 and expect to walk away unscathed. Usually you're left a drooling, gibbering mess at the local insane asylum. That's if you survive.
Yeah, I was about to say, the best you can hope for is having all of your screws loosened.
Yeah, and there's something so intriguing about that, because when a storyteller can craft that experience between you and your friends, you're following clues and you're trying to put together this mystery, and finally when they spring it on you, like, Call of Cthulhu is one of those games where it can almost benefit by not having the players know they're playing Call of Cthulhu. But the problem with that is it's a trick you can only ever pull once. Like, if you hand them a character sheet, they'll have all these stats and numbers, and they won't know what they mean unless you make it like a very generic sheet. Like, because Call of Cthulhu works on a percentile system, which I always thought was really cool. But when you reveal that, the horror behind the stars, Narla Hotep, or, Hastur the Unspeakable has come to Earth, you can pull that stunt once and you can set all the atmosphere you want, because the second you're in a Call of Cthulhu game, like, you're looking at the insanity chart and thinking, well, what kind of Looney Tunes BS can I inflict on my players? And while it's a fun adventure ride, I don't know whether Call of Cthulhu would be suited for long-term campaign play outside of, like, the box sets, like the Masks of Nyarlathotep, Murder on the Orient Express, and I think there's a couple others. I think there's World War Cthulhu. I know Modiphius has Ah-Chung Cthulhu, which is sort of like World War Cthulhu. But yeah, stuff like that. Like, those are the type of experiences that I'm very drawn to. I want the atmospheric. I want the pull of what the IP can really do. So before we go to break, Damien, what are some of the other things that you would love to check out? Or would you play a Call of Cthulhu if given the chance to run it, or would you rather play it?
Well, right now I'm on my actual play podcast that I'm a part of. We're currently playing we're getting into the final phases of a Trail of Cthulhu game, which has been going for a while now. But running one, I've tried to do the whole, like, suspenseful horror, being stalked from the shadows things before, and honestly, I think it's because it wasn't with the right group of players. It hasn't been successful as yet. And it's just, some players like being chaos monkeys no matter what games they're playing. And respect, if that's the type of game you want to play, awesome. But it doesn't work when you're trying to create something more suspense. Like, not every story needs, like, over the top comic relief.
Yeah, exactly. Not everybody needs Carrot Top to show up. But speaking of things that's showing up, it is time for us to take a break here on the Spellbook, right here on Guelph's Community Radio, 93.3 CFRU. We'll be right back with more stuff that we want to play, and maybe you'll play with us. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, my name is Jermaine, and I just walked into CFRU 93.3 FM for the first time. Anybody can volunteer to make radio here. For more information, check out cfru.ca.
Welcome back to the Spellbook right here on CFRU 93.3 Guelph Community Radio, as Mike and I talk about games that we would like to play.
So we were talking about Call of Cthulhu just before the break, and you're mentioning how your actual play podcast, that's Daniel's Dread Tales, right?
That is correct.
So, and you were mentioning when you play certain games, you need to have the right group dynamic. And I kind of wonder, like I've got this problem and I kind of put it, I phrase it this way. I'm chasing the perfect game. Does that exist? And right now in my group of players, there's myself, my friend Peter, my friend Tom, there's Nick, and then there's Sam. And we're a very good group. I love our group dynamic. We're fun. We're experimenting. We're doing great things. But trying to do a horror game with these guys, I don't know whether it would fly except in small doses. So when I play a game, I don't know how I would meet that expectation, because whether I go down to my friendly local game store, whether I go to startplaying.com, or if I go to a convention like, say, Gen Con or something, I don't know whether I'm going to get the experience that I want. And again, that is a completely me problem. Like, I'm putting way too much pressure on something that should be fun. But to me, RPGs have always been that more intimate storytelling experience. And when you and I had a chance to play together, because we played Battletech, and that's probably what I'm going to talk about next, playing that was a really, really, really fun time with you specifically, because Battletech, for those of you that don't know, think of it as big stompy robots in the 30-something century, and it's politics. It's walking tanks with Game of Thrones like politics. There's intrigue, there's incest, there's war crimes, everything a growing person could ask for. And playing it with you, there was a lot of nuance to it, because you knew the lore well enough that someone familiar with the IP would be like, okay, he knows his stuff. And yet you made it approachable enough for someone who had a baseline familiarity, because I'd only really played the video games and some rough stuff in high school in the 90s. And it was really fun and really accessible. Unfortunately, just schedules got in the way. Adulting changed how the dynamics of that group went. And unfortunately, the Iron Badgers are still floating around some planet with evil people on the surface. And there's something about the Battletech game that I've always loved, because the fact that it combines a war mini game, if you want to play the battles out like the tabletop game, you can do that. And then you can have the separate Mech Warrior experience. And very rarely do I see war minis crossover well with a TTRPG. Maybe Fallout does this, maybe with like Fallout Factions and the actual tabletop game for that. But Battletech scratches a very unique itch, because it's one of those games when it comes to lore, if you are willing to invest the time, you can literally learn a complete alternate history that is complete fiction. It doesn't exist. But the fact that there are heroes and villains created for this, there's moral nuance, there is discussions of what does war mean, there's discussions of what does the wartime economy do to people. It really creates this rich tapestry of storytelling potential that makes me want to play in that world more often than I've had the chance to. Like, whenever Piranha Games drops new DLC for Mech Warrior or for Mech Warrior 5 Clans, I am absorbed for like 2 weeks, because I love playing in that world, and the times I've had a chance to play BattleTech, it was really rewarding. And I will definitely say, Damien, you gave me one of the best BattleTech experiences because I got a chance to explore some clan stuff. That's my favorite era, and I think most people love the clan stuff. And we blazed a new path that was canonically possible, which, again, big important thing to mention to our listeners. You can do anything you want in an RPG. Like Matt Mercer or Ed Greenwood or Monty Cook is not going to swoop down from on high and say, "You're not following the law of what I've created. I beat you with this hammer." That's not going to happen. So don't worry about the continuity lawyer. And if you're playing any sort of a Marvel or superheroes game, don't worry about that either. I'm pretty sure the Marvel executives are not going to beat you up. They're not going to send Tom Holland to your house. So that being said, going back to you, Damien, what is another game that you have a big interest in maybe playing?
So I actually, again, I know I'm cheating here, but I have two, and it's kind of for the same reason. Cyberpunk Red
Ooh.
and Shadowrun. Now, I've spoken quite a bit about Shadowrun, but I've never actually gotten the chance to play it. I've read through a lot of the lore. There was a video game that I played like ages ago. That was essential. It was a PC game, and it had similar control and mechanic to like Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. Can't remember the name of it for the life.
Shadowrun Returns and Shadowrun Shadowfall and Hong Kong.
Possibly Returns.
Yeah, I'm a huge Shadowrun guy, so we will have a lot to talk about.
But yeah, so like that's and it's Cyberpunk is mainly because the amount of stories that could be told, both in an action focused way, an intrigue focused way, even even using horror with some of the things that could be explored. There's a lot of different avenues, plus cybernetic tech. And with Shadowrun, I like the fact that it blends that sort of technology and technological possibility with magic.
There was a discussion like we were talking about last week when it comes to high tech and low life, which is basically Shadowrun succinctly summed up as tech noir. It's one of my favorite games, and I would love to play Shadowrun, but it's one of the few games I don't mind running, which is kind of weird because I am the forever DM more often than not, and I've been the forever DM for Dungeons and Dragons for the last couple of years. It pays some bills. It's kind of nice. Star Trek, I don't get a chance to run too often, but when I do, it's fun. But Shadowrun is one of those games where if I can get the right group of players invested, I did have a small group with my friend Brenda and my friend Peter again, and a few other guys, and it was a really fun time because one of my things I love about Shadowrun, you're right, it creates magic and technology, and the lore is so rich and deep that you can do almost anything. It was one of those times where I really felt if I'm willing to layer in layers of like Paul Verhoeven, like RoboCop satire with a little bit of Starship Troopers, with like a little bit of Judge Dredd, you can tell so many interesting stories. And if you want to go off the beaten path and focus more on the magical side of things, you've got it too. Like one of my favorite source books for Shadowrun, at least in second edition, was Paranormal Animals of Europe and North America, because it went into weird stuff like hellhounds and stuff like that. Like there's even a mission they suggest is during one of the corporate extractions that you and I talked about last week. One of the missions they say, hey, what if you had to rescue a group of hellhound puppies? Like, okay, why would I want to rescue puppies? Because a magical dog that breathes fire is an awesome guard dog.
Fire-breathing doggo friend.
Yeah, so like that's so much rich storytelling potential there, but there's also other things. As you mentioned, there's like tech. So you've got like intrusion countermeasure electronics, ice that can fry your brain as you jack into the Matrix. Or if you want to go weird, you can have you dealing a corporate deal with Sader Krupp and Loftwire and his, machinations against Az technology. And I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out at people that I don't necessarily get, but Shadowrun is corporate intrigue meets the Matrix meets Lord of the Rings. And it's one of the most interesting settings I've ever played in. The main problem with Shadowrun, it's the game system. Yeah. Way back when, it used to be run by FOSSA, and in recent years, since FOSSA has been sold off and functionally no longer exists, it's now run by Catalyst Game Labs. Now, there are simpler editions of the game that run on the Shadowrun Anarchy engine, which is very similar to BattleTech's MechWarrior Destiny, where it takes a lot of the crunch out and simplifies it.
Yeah, Catalyst Games calls that their queue system, and it's actually pretty intuitive. It's really easy to pick up and start running if you haven't used the system before. That's one good thing I will say about that.
Mm-hmm. And Cyberpunk Red, that's a game I wish more people talked about, because when Cyberpunk 2077 came out, that was such a gaming watershed moment, because we saw it announced back in 2013, I want to say, maybe 12. And the CG trailer for that blew people away, that has kept getting delayed. And then there was the problem with the video game's launch. I know we covered it on This Week in Geek, because we had early access to the Stadia copy, and I had access to the Xbox Series X copy about 3 or 4 weeks before release. And it's such an intriguing world too. And the fact that it's Cyberpunk that relies on, just interesting technology and stuff like that. It just, I don't know. I love what it does with its world. It feels so alive, and it doesn't rely on hellhounds or magic. It's pure tech, it's people, it's corruption, it's political, but it's also very, 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 very human. So my friend Nick is a huge fan of Cyberpunk, and he used to tell me about all the shopping guides that that this game used to have. And I remember when I used to go to my high school, one of my friends, Brad, had a copy of Cyberpunk 2020. And I remember reading through the book. I'm like, what the hell's a chain rip? He's like, it's a chainsaw arm. And I'm thinking, what? Because we don't have that in Shadowrun. I mean, maybe they do now, but it was just one of those things that it intrigued me. But I don't feel like Cyberpunk Red is as well supported as it should be. But I think if you got the right, this is going to sound weird, but I think if you got the right neo-anarchist, if you could somehow get Mr. Robot to run your Cyberpunk game, I think you would have the most intense game ever. And probably by the end of it, you think you could take on, I don't know, Microsoft and go raid their corporate headquarters by the end of your first session. I think that's how intense it would get. And that's about the beauty of these Cyberpunk games. They really want to invite you in because it's so close to our own reality that it's like, hey, you're looking down the road and realizing we're not that far off of certain things. And yeah, that's what I love about those games too. And I'm totally with you. I want to play them, but if you ask me to run a Shadowrun game and I've got players that are buying in, that's one of the few times I'm going to actually have a hard time saying no to running something. And that's rare with me, I will say. So as we approach going out to our next break here on the show, where do we want to go next, Damien? Where do we want to expand our horizons to? Or what is the itch that's waiting to be scratched?
Ooh. I think talking about games we've recently discovered that we would like.
I love the sound of that. So we're going to talk about all that and more right here on the most powerful station in Guelph. Well, not really, but we're here, so it counts. You're listening to 93.3 CFRU, Guelph Community Radio. This is the Spellbook. I'm Mike, he's Damien, and we'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Lee Fields. You're listening to CFRU. You heard me, CFRU.
Welcome back to the Spellbook, right here on CFRU 93.3, Guelph Community Radio.
So before the break, we were chatting about what games that we want to check out and games that we've discovered recently. And I would call this a fairly recent game for me. I'll let Damien kind of gather his kind of thoughts on this, because this is another one of those games that I love the universe that it's in, and I've only had the opportunity to run it once, and I've played it once, actually with you, of all people. And I'm talking about the Aliens role-playing game. Now, this has been around for quite some time, relatively speaking. I think 2018, maybe. And it's done by Free League Publishing. I'm actually an NPC in the box set Heart of Darkness under my old name. I die horribly, so that's fun. But what I like about the Alien TTRPG, especially with the new Evolved edition that came out late last year and into early this year, is that it really captures the feel and the vibe of those movies, that claustrophobic, in space, no one can hear you scream. And it doesn't matter what types of superior firepower you're bringing. Overconfidence will get you killed just as much as a double jaw to the face. And what I love about discovering that game is how well supported it is. And the fact that the books pull from different things. And I'm going to give you an example. So they published a book during the first edition's life cycle that was the Colonial Marines Operations Manual. Sounds cool. Sounds like a splat book, if there ever was one. Like, hey, here's some information about the United Space Marines. Here's some of the cool weapons they use. Here's some information about the Octurans, which is only mentioned in passing in Aliens, whatever. But what really made me take notice of this game was the love that was put into it. And one of the authors, Andrew Gaska, did something pretty cool. In that book, if you remember, Damien, because you and I are approximately the same age, there used to be a line of toys by Kenner, the same guys who made DC Superpowers, the Terminator toys, Jurassic Park. But they produced Aliens figures in the early 1990s. And in the Aliens Colonial Operations Manual, they mention a vehicle. And this blew my mind to the point where I was like, oh my God, what is this? And there's a vehicle that was produced in the Kenner toy line called the Stinger. Mm-hmm. The Stinger had this ridiculous Jurassic Park-esque capture claw, a missile launcher, and it was like a super dune buggy. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. No practical sense. But they statted it. So when I discovered this was in the Aliens RPG, and when I discovered there was stuff that was taken from Alien Isolation, which is a fantastic video game from 2014, when I discovered there's stuff from Covenant in here, stuff from Prometheus, and even in the book now, in the Evolved Edition, they have stuff from Alien Romulus. That's pretty impressive. So when I look at the refines that have happened to the game system, they've redone how Panic Dice worked. I know when you and I played this on the Daniel's Dread Tale podcast, we barely got out of the pods before we think I had like a broken arm or something. I'm thinking, well, come on. Mind you, I died great with my smart gun. But it was like ridiculous, but I still loved the improvements that have been made to that system. So I'd say that's a game I discovered fairly recently that I've got a lot of passion for. What about you?
So the big one, honestly, for me, and we kind of spoke about this before we started recording. So I was recently at my local anime store picking up a couple of things for myself, and I came across the Goblin Slayer TTRPG. Now, I did not know this existed before 2 weeks ago. And I also did not know before 2 weeks ago that I needed this in my life. Now, this is a brick of a book. Like, it's if you read manga, it's about the, length and width of probably a little bit bigger than your typical manga volume. But the thickness of it, gods, it's insane. And like reading through it, I haven't like poured through it just yet, but the system looks pretty solid. It's basically you just roll a d. Sorry, yeah, it's 2d6, 2d6 plus stats. And they actually took care to make it feel like the show.
Mhm.
So like you could have it as gritty as you want, and if if the Goblin Slayer world is one that you want to spend a lot of time in and play in and like make your own stories in, is in my opinion what TTRPG is for, but that's a different conversation.
Mhm.
That it seems like a pretty good system, and I would be excited to play with other people. Now, it's one of those systems that I would like to play it before running it,
Mhm.
just because it is a little bit more complex than say something like Shadowrun Anarchy or MechWarrior Destiny or like Blades in the Dark. Um,
Mhm.
but it's it's one that I would like to sit down and play because I think it's a cool setting, and a pretty solid system.
One of the things that always surprises me, and especially because we live here in the city of Guelph, Ontario, or I do anyway, surprisingly, one of the first anime role playing games I ever played was actually made here in the city. And it was called Big Eyes Small Mouth, or Besm. And they produce a number of spin off books that I think currently it's in fourth or fifth edition right now. And there was a Sailor Moon TTRPG that ran on what's known as the TriStat system. Literally 3d6, that's it. And as the game expanded, you could add other books to it. There's like Hot Rods and Gun Bunnies. There was like a giant freaking robot book and some other stuff, and it was so modular. But when you mentioned stuff like Goblin Slayer, that reminded me I've seen books for Trigun, I've seen Bubblegum Crisis, I've seen New Dominion Tank Police. I recently reviewed last year the Cowboy Bebop RPG. There's one for Fantasy Star, which I think is really well done for its time. I'm honestly surprised that no one has taken the license up for other anime RPGs. Like, I'm very surprised there's not an Attack on Titan. I'm very surprised there's not anything for Gundam. At least if there is, it's not in English. Because remember hearing this stat, and I may be wrong on this one, but I seem to recall that role playing games are not too big in Japan, which is kind of sad because they have so many cool IPs. Like, I remember I played a hack using GURPS, or Generic Universal Role Playing System, by Steve Jackson Games, and I ran a Neon Genesis Evangelion game that was set before episode 15 of the series, which is where I think the Jetalone robot appears, which I always thought was really cool. I guess in terms for me, the next game, this is a shared memory that you and I, once again, it's I'm noticing a trend with me. I want to go back and revisit the past, but this is different though in a weird way. I would love to play in a World of Darkness game, and I would be willing to try the new World of Darkness. So currently, Renegade Game Studios, the guys who do Power Rangers, Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, they have the World of Darkness license, and that includes Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Hunter the Reckoning. And I don't know, I can't recall whether they have Wraith or anything like that, but either way, World of Darkness, for those of you that aren't familiar, was this thing that came out in the early 90s. It really started with Vampire the Masquerade, then it expanded to Werewolf the Apocalypse, and then probably Changeling, maybe?
I think Hunter was next, then
Yeah.
Changeling. And then yeah, actually it might have been Hunter Mage Changeling.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because Hunter was the last book to be released.
Yeah, it was. It's a big shared universe. Everything fights everything else, basically.
Yeah, and that's something we're definitely going to do a focus on in the future because me and Damien both came from this. And what I love about the World of Darkness, it's the meta plot. And what is that? So when I started with this back in the 90s, everything fought everything, but there's always a continuing plot that would continue throughout each book. And even Vampire the Masquerade had a series of 13 novels that were each based upon different clans, from the Camarilla to the Sabbat, and you could follow this huge plot. And those stories were then continued in the books with each book had a lead up to its final battle. For Vampire, it was called Guiana. For Werewolf, it was called The Apocalypse. Yeah. For Hunters, it was, I don't remember if we had a proper term for it, but it was called The Time of Judgment. And I would love to play with someone who knows all the meta plot for The Time of Judgment. Like Hunter the Reckoning, I always took that to be my game, but since I've gotten more in touch with my indigenous roots, I've really taken to Werewolf, so much so that I have the Philodox moon tattooed on my neck on my left-hand side. And I have my Children of Gaia tribal ink on my left arm as well, because that's the tribe I've always identified with in Werewolf. And I love the idea that it's basically eco warriors, hippies fighting back against these evil corporations or vampires or stuff that should not be. And a lot of it is based around family. Like your werewolf kin may be brothers and sisters. Maybe they were born a wolf and they became a person, or vice versa. You became it's in your blood. You're a lycanthrope, you're guru, as they call it. And I've always loved just the idea that there's so many people trying to fight to save the world, but no one can agree on how to do it. And then even a tribe of these powerful warriors who are supposed to be protecting the world from something known as the Worm, this evil force of chaos that went crazy. This group called the Black Spiral Dancers. They used to be great warriors, and now they've fallen into despair and insanity, and now they're the biggest enemies that fight you. Or there's something known as the Weaver, which is how technology is breathed throughout the world, and it threatens to overwrite and corrupt everything. What do you do against that? Certain tribes have to work with it, like the Bone Gnawers or the Glass Walkers. And I've always really loved that message, because for me, when I play a role-playing game, as much as I love the crunch, as much as I love walking into a dungeon and doing Ass Kicker Supreme combo number 5, I want a story that makes me feel. And there's something about the World of Darkness. When it was first pitched to me, I actually spoke with Nicole from Green Ronin. I kind of have affectionately nicknamed her RPG Mom. She was one of the original people who worked on the World of Darkness. And I've always appreciated how everybody early on at White Wolf, back when it was that, really wanted to tell the darker side of reality. They called it gothic punk.
Yep.
And I've always loved that, because Vampire, it never took to me the same way it did in our little group of friends. And I would love to go back in time and ask people, like, what is it about that makes this interesting to you? Is it just because you like vampires? Is this an Anne Rice thing? Is this a Buffy thing? Where does your love of this particular genre come from? Because for me, I always connect it very much to literary roots and stuff like that. So again, before we go to break, what is your next pick?
Ooh. See, I think going over some things that probably should be TTRPGs that we would like to play.
I think I like that. So we'll have a lot of cool stuff to talk about, because there's a lot of IP, I'm surprised, that are not role-playing games. So we'll be back right after this, right here on the Spellbook on Guelph's Community Radio, 93.3 CFRU.
Hi, this is Respectful Child, and you're listening to CFRU 93.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Spellbook, right here on CFRU 93.3, Guelph Community Radio. We're talking about TTRPGs that we would like to play, and right now, more specifically, TTRPGs that should exist, but don't officially.
One thing that has blown my mind since 2011, 2012, how in the hell is there not an official Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls RPG? Like, does this not seem like the easiest slam dunk in the world? Like, literally, Todd Howard could come out on stage. Hey, you can play Skyrim on your fridge, but can you play it in the car? And, he pulls out a copy of the Skyrim core rulebook or something. You know what I mean? The Elder Scrolls, I know it seems generic fantasy, but it's so not. There's so much lore in there and like ridiculously dumb stuff. It's more than just you stole my sweet roll. There's so much adventure across the world of Tamriel. It surprises me so much that this doesn't exist.
I hate to give the man ideas, not that he's listening to the show. If he is, cool. But he would make so much money from that. It would get picked up by the Elder Scrolls content creators immediately. And then the rest of the video game content creators shortly thereafter. And yeah, he would be sleeping on a mountain of money after.
Yeah, it's so strange that this doesn't exist because literally each game could almost be its own sub game or at least a very big campaign box set. It's so strange that this doesn't exist for whatever reason. Like, I know one thing that, again, kind of following along the same lines, like, why isn't this a game? One of my favorite sci-fi franchises of all time is Mass Effect. Now, there was a Dragon Age RPG that came out in a series of big box sets, and that was published by Green Ronin. I had every single book, but I gave them to my brother a couple of years back as a birthday gift because Dragon Age is his thing. I've never much cared for the world of the Warden and all that stuff. It's just never struck me. But when I think about Mass Effect, I mean, if they're worried about setting it during a timeline, if you really wanted to, and this would be my quick 30-second pitch for this, if you took Mass Effect, if you had the role-playing game take place between Mass Effects 2 and 3, Commander Shepard is alive, maybe a fugitive, or he's dead, he or she is dead, and the galaxy's still in trouble, the Reapers are still out there, the Geth are still out there, and Cerberus is either a good guy or a bad guy. It's how you decide to play it. And then the splat books can be, here's the First Contact War, here's the Andromeda box set, here is the Citadel DLC done up as like a one-shot or something. It surprised me. Now, I have seen hacks. I saw one really good hack that somebody did using Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I've seen a really good hack using Fate Core rules for it. We actually played this on one of our old podcasts I used to produce called Terrible Warriors, and we called it, I think it was called Paragon Lost, was the episodes that we did, and I was the storyteller about that. I think I had that said about Solarian separatists or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, that's an easy pick for me. What about you?
And I know we've spoken about this a while ago, back on YouTube, but Final Fantasy.
Yeah, and again, it seems like you have so many worlds. Like, if you develop the base game, like, here's how attacks work, here's armor class, whatever, every single game is an expansion that you can just build. You could literally just pop down the materials on like a GURPS or something. Like, okay, guys, we're playing Final Fantasy 6 today. We're going to play Final Fantasy 12 today or whatever.
Yeah.
You could do it so easy. As long as you got the base mechanics figured out. Now, maybe each game, like say Final Fantasy 8, for example, has the junctioning for their magic system. Okay, if you're playing Final Fantasy 8, here's how junctioning works. Or if you're playing any of the other games, like I'm trying to think of other games that have a unique mechanic in it. Limit breaks in Final Fantasy 7, maybe there's an option to figure out if you hit so many criticals in a single fight, maybe something happens or something like that. Yeah, like that's a world that screams, do you like money? I know you do. I mean, for example, to give people a little bit of inside baseball, I work closely with the Magic the Gathering team. And I've had discussions, and one of the things I found out, and this is publicly available information, but the Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy set sold really, really well. Like we're talking millions of units within the first week. And it created a lot of new players coming into the space. And when I think about the role-playing game industry, while it is quote-unquote considered niche, I completely disagree. If you told me tomorrow, oh, hey guys, we're going to do a Final Fantasy tabletop role-playing game. Really? Oh, and we're setting it during Final Fantasy 7, that game would be sold out within 24 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
And even if you did a smaller property, like, say, Persona, again, if you said, hey guys, we're going to do a Persona 5 Royal edition of the universe. You can play your own version of the Phantom Thieves. And if you pre-order now, you'll get first dibs on Persona 4 Golden. Again, that would sell out in 24 hours because JRPG fans are loyal, they are fanatical, and they know what they like. So if you have the right people designing these games, and I wouldn't make them D20 combat games because I don't think a D20 combat game would necessarily work for something like Persona because that's more of a narrative thing. Combat happens, yes, but developing your persona, your awakening, there's a lot of nuance to that, which I think would make the game rather fun. Other games I'm surprised don't exist or surprised haven't come back. For example, way back once upon a time, we talked about Cyberpunk. There was the company who made that was Artal Saurian, and they did the Dragon Ball Z game, and they did 3 source books. They did the first book, they did the Frieza saga, they did the Cell saga, they did the first part of it with the androids, and that's as far as that book got. There was, I can't tell you if it's real or not, but someone did, I think it was, they did the first part of Boo, or maybe the Garlic Jr. saga got adapted. I can't remember which, but that's a game I'm surprised nobody has brought back yet, is Dragon Ball, because who doesn't want a big martial arts fighting game that's all like the Shoujin Jump characters? Like you could have the One Punch guy fight Goku or some like BS or something.
Oh yeah, 100%. The first like anime, quote unquote anime game that I ever played was a Dragon Ball game. Unfortunately, it was some like weird janky D6 system that like didn't really make much sense.
Yeah, it just doesn't scale well.
it just was kind of a bad system, but like that's something, yeah, like I would, if tomorrow I was scrolling through Kickstarter and saw somebody came out with like a Dragon Ball system or a Final Fantasy, like an officially licensed product for, one of those 2 properties, I'd drop yep, I'm backing it. I want a physical copy. Give it to me.
There is one group on Kickstarter right now, and I don't have their name in front of me, but they are doing a K-pop Demon Hunters inspired D&D thing, and it's their whole original IP, but very much heavily influenced by K-pop Demon Hunters.
Interesting.
I think that is so cool, because when I was watching K-pop Demon Hunters about a month ago, I was like, wait a second, that's a bard ability. Is that a cleric-like ability? And I'm watching thinking, hey, wait a second, why is this not D&D? And then sure enough, like 2 weeks later, they announced it on Kickstarter. As of this recording, I believe it's live now. I haven't had a chance to back the project. I'll probably will. Other things I'm surprised. Yeah.
As of this recording, I still have not seen that movie.
It is so good. And the fact that it won Best Picture and Best Song, let me tell you, there are a few things that sparked joy. That sparked joy. I was so very happy. I guess as we begin to kind of wrap up the show here, I know some upcoming things I'm excited to play. One of my homegrown studios here in Guelph is a game company called Linvader, and they are doing the Thundercats role-playing game, which I'm tremendously excited for. I just found out a friend of mine's husband is the colorist on the Thunderhawks Silverhawks crossover comic that's being produced right now, which I think is pretty kick-ass. I'm very surprised there's no He-Man role-playing game. There was one back in the early 1980s. I'm very surprised nothing like that exists now. Why is there no Halo RPG? There was the live-action TV show, whether you like it or hate it, still. There's no Gears of War. I'm so surprised so many properties just don't get adapted. And from the inside baseball I've been given by some people who run some of these RPG companies, the one piece I was told by someone who was very high up at a company is they said sometimes the license holders don't know what to do, or they're too protective of the IP to let it happen, which is such a disappointment. Because like I said, if you told me I could get Mass Effect, I would buy it. If you told me I could get Ghostbusters, I would buy it. If you told me, you know what, I'll pull an obscure pick here, and then we should probably get out of here for the day. I would love for someone to go back and adapt Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern and do it properly. I would love to see that done with love and the reverence for the material. So, final question goes to you, my friend. What do you want to play that doesn't exist yet? You get the final word on this.
Ooh, what do I want to play?
No pressure, eh?
Yet? Yeah, that's I mean, I kind of went over it with Final Fantasy. I would love to play an official like Final Fantasy VIII like campaign. Not necessarily like play the game, but you know, just
set
play
in that
world, and explore like the effects that Guardian forces have on your memory, because that's something that, spoiler warning, it's brought up in the game. I've been playing it recently because I found that they've remastered it. I didn't think that they did, but I'm super happy that they did. But like, just existing in that world as a player, I think would be interesting. Like, to be able to, as I said before, write your own story in that universe.
I think that'd be rather exciting. I do. So, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Spellbook. We will be back next week, right here, next Wednesday at noon. Next week, we're going to be talking about tabletop role-playing gift guides. So if you're looking to get something for your friends, family, or whoever, we might have some suggestions for you, and it won't be the low-hanging fruit, though there might be a little bit because you got to give it a little bit of spice. Anyway, for the Spellbook from the great city of London, we have been...
I am Damien, Magical Hack Morphit.
I have been Mike the Birdman, saying, be excellent to each other. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on the Spellbook.
It's not enough. We have a gallery of villains to look out for, but now we could be infiltrated by a shape changer. I can't even tell if any of you are acting strange because you've been replaced or because this group is full of weirdos.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Spellbook. If you happen to have any comments or suggestions, please send us an email at thespellbookshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're hungry for more, you can find Mike at thisweekingeek.net, covering a variety of nerdy topics, and Damien on YouTube at Magical Hack Makes for more TTRPG conversation.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.